Hello EFD squad and welcome back to Transfer Review. Today we've got Joe Tomlinson on the show. It's a special edition. We are absolutely sweating our nuts off. So this is going to be a quick one. Where do we start, Joe?
We start in Paris because the Parisians are apparently interested in bringing Jerome Boateng to the side. That's according to Sky Germany. He's reportedly been made available by the Bavarians, which would come as something of a shock to me. But Rummenigge did say last week that there has currently been no direct contact between the clubs, but I think there has been contact between the advisors of the player. So that is very, very interesting. Paris United, who are on Twitter and also extremely reliable on PSG transfer rumours, they always seem to get the scoop. They've claimed that Thomas Tuchel actually met with Boateng last month ahead of the proposed move. There's no exact fee been mentioned so far, which leads me to think that it's probably going to be fairly chunky, but in my opinion it would significantly bolster that PSG backline. Yes, he might be a little bit older, but I think that they have potentially been missing that experienced head alongside Thiago Silva at the back. As good as Marquinhos has been, and I think Kimpembe got the most minutes of any PSG centre-back last season, I still think that Boateng would improve that backline. As for Thomas Tuchel, he doesn't generally play with a 3 at the back, but he has operated with it at times in the past. He played a 3-1-2-4 and a 3-3-2-2 at times at Dortmund. So whether or not you could see a backline of Thiago Silva, Marquinhos and Jerome Boateng next season remains to be seen. But it would be quite exciting, wouldn't it, Pato? Yeah,
I think this would be a big move. And it's kind of one of those moves that could facilitate Tuchel's entire style, right?
Yes.
Like he wants to pass it out of the back. He needs that distributor. In the past, he's had Hummels do it. He had Mark Bartra do it. And I think that he kind of needs a guy like Boateng.
Agreed.
Silva's a good passer, Marquinhos is a good passer, but none of them offer what Boateng has. Last season averaged 8.6 long balls a game. That's the largest average of any outfield player in the Bundesliga, and it's more than Thiago Silva and Marquinhos combined. I think when you've got 3 centre-backs, even if you're playing a 4 at the back, I do think that you need to add another one. Like you do worry a little bit about where that depth comes from.
Yeah.
Thiago Silva's been there for a long time now, but Marquinhos, who at one point promised to become the best centre-back in the world, has maybe not kicked on quite the way you'd want him to. He's obviously got injury issues as well. Boateng profiles pretty similarly to these guys because he also plays on a dominant possession side. He's also only making about 1.5 tackles and interceptions per game. That's just what happens when you have the ball all the time. It's impossible for you to go out and win it back. But I guess the question would be whether somebody kicks a fuss up if he does arrive. This is the problem with PSG now, and it's something Tuchel hasn't really had to contend with before. How does a squad full of guys who are used to being stars react when you start benching some of them? You'd have thought that he'd want to give minutes to Presnel Kimpembe. He looks like a promising young player. Like you said, played the most minutes of any PSG defender last season. And Tuchel has been known to put his faith in young players. But if he wants to play Kimpembe and he wants to play Boateng, then Silva's going to sit on the bench. Marquinhos is going to sit on the bench. I don't think he'll be playing Marquinhos at right back, which other guys have done before to make sure he gets minutes. So this could lead to a little bit of a headache for Thomas Tuchel. However, I think we all agree Boateng needs to be playing first-class football next season. Only got 1,600 minutes last year because of a combination of injuries and the strength of his teammates. What do you think?
Look, I think it would be a great signing for PSG, and obviously, like you said, Boateng needs minutes, especially with the emergence of Nicolas Süle in that Bayern Munich team.
Sure.
So I think if he's going to play at 3 at the back, I think it's a very good move. If he's going to play at 4 at the back, I'm not sure I like it as much. I think with Marquinhos and Kimpembe's profiles, I would prefer them to be the emerging centre-back duo with Thiago Silva being rotated. I think to sacrifice one of them potentially for Boateng, I think is a little bit of a risk. And I think there'll be some big name sides buzzing around Marquinhos and Kimpembe if that rumour is true. But what do you guys at home think? Should PSG sign Jerome Boateng? And if so, how much should they be paying? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The next move we're going to be talking about is Axel Witsel to Borussia Dortmund. Now, you're not a fan of this move, are you, Pat?
I hate this move, but Bild are reporting it. They say that Dortmund and PSG are interested in him, and RMC go one step further. They say the deal was very close. Transfer fee of around 20 million euros looks likely for the 29-year-old. So it kind of looks like this one's on the cards. Now, this makes no sense to me. Like, Dortmund have already brought in Thomas Delaney in midfield, who I'm not a fan of either, but he can at least recycle the ball, makes a decent number of tackles and interceptions, around 4 a game. But Axel Witsel, only about 2.8 tackles and interceptions a game. That was during the World Cup in Russia, where you'd expect he had a lot to do because of the porousness of that defence. 94% pass accuracy, though, which you can see making sense at a Dortmund side, especially seeing as Thomas Delaney's pass accuracy is 72%. It's absolutely bleak. He spent the last couple of years in China, where he's been earning a weekly wage of 380,000 euros.
Disgusting.
I mean, I can't believe that some people have enough money lying around that they want to give that much of it to Axel Witsel. But to me, the issue here isn't that Witsel isn't a particularly great player. It isn't that he's an old player. It isn't that they're going to have to pay him a lot of money. It isn't that they've already brought in Delaney. The issue is what this means for their young stars.
Yeah, I mean, they're almost definitely going to have to sell one. And it looks like it's going to be Julian Weigl, which would be a big shock to me because we all know his talent. He's apparently been in talks with PSG and Manchester City, and Borussia Dortmund have priced him at about 50 million euros, which isn't actually that bad for a young defensive midfielder in this current market when you look at some of the other transfer fees have been paid recently, i.e. Richarlison for 50 million. But would it be a good swap for BVB? I completely agree with you, Pato. I think it is a downgrade. I think you lose a really good profile player for a player that in 2 years you're going to have to replace again in the form of Julian, in the form of Axel Witsel. And he just doesn't compare. He doesn't stack up Julian Weigl to Axel Witsel. Weigl is making 4.2 combined tackles and interceptions a game. He's averaging over 3 long balls. I think Witsel in Russia or China was averaging like 0.7. So he's a far superior player already, Julian Weigl. I'd be really shocked if Favre came in and decided to axe him in favour of maybe a more experienced, but I would say a worse replacement in the form of Axel Witsel. I mean, 6 years in Russia and China, he hasn't really played.
Yeah, he's never played in the top league, has he?
He literally hasn't. I mean, you could say potentially the last major league he played in was 2012 when he was at Benfica. But even that, are we including the Liga NOS as one of the top 5 leagues in Europe? I don't think we are anymore, are we? So I would say this is a massive risk for Borussia Dortmund. I think it's a downgrade on Julian Weigl. But what I will say is if PSG or Manchester City can get their hands on him, they've done pretty good business at 50 million euros, don't you think, Pat?
Yeah, Julian Weigl, I think, will definitely be wanted in the market. The interesting question to me is, if Witsel goes to Dortmund and Weigl goes to PSG, where does Verratti go?
I don't know.
Because he and Verratti play in exactly the same space, and we know that he's already fallen out with Tuchel over Tuchel putting him on this special diet.
Yeah.
Tuchel said that he was getting a bit chunky. That starts to get interesting because then you see United maybe take an interest as they have done before. You certainly see Man City, I think.
For sure.
Like
maybe Barcelona.
Could be an interesting one. I mean, this one could really knock over some dominoes in the last couple of weeks of the transfer window. So we'll see where it goes. But what do you guys think? Is Witsel a good move for Dortmund? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we head over to Italy, where Inter Milan are apparently looking for a central midfielder, and they're stuck between Hector Herrera and Arturo Vidal.
Wow, the profile of these two players leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. Yes, Vidal would he be a great addition? I don't know if he'd be a great addition, but he'd certainly be a big enough name for Inter Milan.
Sure.
And that seems to be who they are chasing down. But they've already signed Radin Nainggolan this summer. Let's not forget he's 30 years old, a smoker and an alcoholic by all accounts. And Vidal, 31 years old, a smoker and alcoholic. So we can see the profile they're looking for. Effectively shopping in Alcoholics Anonymous this summer. They're after him at the tune of 30 million euros, which seems a lot of money to me. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Bayern very willing to sell. So 30 million euros to me seems a little bit pricey for a 31-year-old. Hector Herrera, 28 years old, so still profiles quite old, but would cost them about 10 million euros cheaper at 20. For me though, both these players, I'm not too sure that they need him. They've already got an extremely stacked midfield, haven't they, Pat?
Well, they've already got Brozovic, who I think is going to be the centrepiece of that midfield for a long time. They've got Nainggolan, as you said, but last year they bought 3 central midfielders. They got in Matthias Vecino, they got in Roberto Gagliardini, and of course they brought in Borja Valero, who's already 33 as well.
What are they profiling?
So this is turning into a really, really old midfield, and that's a bit of a worry for me with Inter. Like, they're both good players. Herrera and Vidal are both useful. But my worry is that these are all players who are reliant on their legs. They're reliant on their energy. Last season, Both of these players were averaging about 4.4 tackles and interceptions per game. That's very, very good. But you are going to see that decline as they get older. You may even see it decline immediately with Herrera, simply because he's coming into a tougher league. Now, he completed more dribbles, more key passes than Vidal last season, but Vidal was more of a goal threat. He was getting 0.4 goals per 90 minutes.
What?
Which is very high, but you've got to think that with Nainggolan averaging 2 key passes a game last season, Nainggolan's going to be the most advanced of that midfield three. And doesn't that kind of take away from what Vidal does well? Vidal felt to me like a sort of Man United purchase, where Mourinho was like, you know what, in the short term, this guy's going to be great. But that's not the way that Spalletti has generally been in the past.
I think it's odd. I'm not too sure about the balance of a midfield of Brozovic, Vidal and Nainggolan. I think there's a lot of pressure on Brozovic to do defensive work in there. Yeah, I think Nainggolan and Vidal both going to try and press a little bit higher up the pitch, and I'm not too sure that works. But 30 million euros in the current market, I know that we say it's a little bit expensive. Yeah. It's kind of, for Inter Milan, a risk they're probably willing to take just because he's a big name.
Yeah, but I think they also still need to add to their attacking options.
Yeah.
You know, they obviously went for Malcolm, didn't get him. They've brought in Politano, who is a good young winger.
So much pressure on Icardi, man.
Youngish, 24, I think, and he will produce something. Kandreva, though, getting very old, and I do think, like you say, it's just about Icardi. Like, Perisic is now hitting 30. You need to add to your attacking options in wide positions, and I don't think that you need to add another player to what's already a stacked midfield. If I were Inter Milan, I would probably be thinking it's still 1 or 2 years until you're getting elite performance out of Jan Karamo, if then. So I'd be looking for a winger instead. But Spalletti's going to do what Spalletti's going to do. This one, not for me.
Not for me either. Our next transfer rumour comes from Cope, and it's Michy Batshuayi who's got more problems, Pato.
Yeah, new manager, same problems for Michy. He might get shipped out on loan, and apparently Valencia are interested in him. That's because their current recognised strikers, Rodrigo and Simone Zaza, have been linked with moves away. Zaza to Milan and Rodrigo to Real Madrid. Now, to me, I would probably sell either of those. Like, certainly Rodrigo. Rodrigo overperformed his expected goals last season. I think he got 16 goals in the league, but that was far above what XG would predict for him to get. And I think often when a player overachieves like that and they're about 27, that's a really good time to sell. You're never going to get as good a price. Look at last season, right? Belotti, we were talking about going for 100 million euros. Massively overperformed his expected goals. This season, reverted. I think he got under 10 goals in the league, maybe. Certainly under 15. And suddenly nobody's talking about him for that price. Sometimes you've got to sell and strike while the iron's hot. So if you could sell Rodrigo and bring in Michy Batshuayi, then that would be great business, especially if you can get a buyout clause in the loan deal. It's likely to be a lot of money. Remember, Chelsea paid nearly £35 million for him, and obviously his form at Dortmund was sensational last season. So I think he was getting 0.8 goals a game against an expected total of 0.7. So that's hyper elite. That's so good that you kind of think, I don't know, Chelsea are probably going to want a 50 million, 60 million euro clause in there just in case he has a monster season and they want to sell him to somebody else or even bring him back to the club.
But Rodrigo, you could argue, slightly more of a winger than an out-and-out centre-forward, completing 1.3 dribbles per 90 last season. He's also up there with Simone Zaza, isn't he? But Michy Batshuayi, slightly more of a out-and-out striker, you would probably say, especially when he was at Borussia Dortmund, taking 3 shots per game from inside the box. And I think that would put him second in La Liga behind Cristiano Ronaldo last season for shots inside the box. So he would be a great addition to a Valencia side that saw Simone Zaza kind of fizzle out towards the back end of the season. But his fizzling out did see the emergence, didn't it, of Santi Mina. Now, 22 years old, I think he got 12 and 1,500 minutes last season, so he is one of Valencia's more exciting young talents, and if you bring Batshuayi in, you kind of say to Santi Mina, look, your minutes are going to be very, very limited next season, because if you bring him in on loan, he's going to have to play for you. They've also been very interested, Valencia, in Origi at Liverpool, apparently close to agreeing a £27 million fee for the striker there, and I know Liverpool are quite keen to sell, seeing they've got about 55 strikers in their ranks, and if they could get £27 million for a player who's going to play probably sub 500 minutes for them this season, they'll be very happy with that. So between Batshuayi and Divock Origi, Pato, would you go for Batshuayi on loan or would you go for Origi on a permanent?
I don't really know enough about Origi's form to know whether he's a good prospect. Batshuayi is the much better player, I think. But yeah, the issue is if it's just a loan, then I don't know if I do. Like, if I'm a club of Valencia's size, I probably want to be building for the future rather than developing players for other clubs so they can sell them. So if I can get Batshuayi with a good buyout, then I go for it. Or if I can get him on a permanent, I go for it. Otherwise, I think I'm more inclined to get somebody in and have an asset of my own rather than just have somebody on loan.
Yeah, I completely agree. If I was Valencia, I'd be kind of pushing the agenda of a end of season buy clause or potentially even saying we want him on a permanent, but we're willing to put a fairly cheap 50, 60 million euro buyback clause with Chelsea in the contract. I think that's probably a better option for them than potentially getting a loan deal just for the season, especially with a player that young. But what do you guys at home think? Michy Batshuayi to Valencia, is it a goer? Vote in the poll up there right now to decide.
Time for the transfer shocker, and it's Yerry Mina, who apparently is on his way out of Barcelona, and there are a couple of contenders for him.
Yes, apparently. Now, we're not too sure about the non-EU regulations in La Liga, but as far as we're aware, they can only have 3 non-EU players at Barcelona. They've currently got Coutinho, they've got Arthur, and they've got Malcolm. That's as far as we're aware. And 3 non-EU players. Luis Suarez holds a dual Italian passport. Lionel Messi is, I think, Spanish passport worthy. So they have to sell one of their non-EU players, and it looks like it's going to be Yerry Mina to the tune of about 20 million euros, which seems cheap as chips, doesn't it? Everton, very interested in him. Lyon, particularly interested in him, that's according to RMC. So if that transfer happens, it could happen pretty quickly. But no surprise, one more club are interested. They're signing everybody this summer. It's Jorge Mendes FC.
Yeah, Wolverhampton Wanderers might bring him in to add to their roster of really kind of Europa League, maybe even lower Champions League quality players. They've obviously got João Moutinho, Rui Patricio, Raul Jimenez. These are incredible signings, and apparently they might get Yerry Mina now as well. That would potentially boost them up to contending for that 7th place spot. You know, being like the best teams outside the normal top 6.
I am slightly nervous though they're going to do an AC Milan and just kind of be like...
explode, yeah.
Just absolutely implode at one stage, and everybody's going to not get paid for about 3 consecutive months. That
would be amazing. Like, I don't actually know how they're bankrolled, except that I know Jorge Mendes is involved, so I assume it's shady as But I don't know. If he's going to go somewhere, surely he'd want to go to Lyon, but maybe if Wolves are paying big wages, God knows. It's just weird. He signed for Barcelona 6 months ago, scores 3 goals in 3 games at the World Cup, and then they say, oh, you know what, you're not good enough for us.
I know.
We've had enough.
It is odd. I actually saw also a quick rumour on, I believe it was like the Daily Mail or some nonsense like that, that Manchester United were quite interested in him, but I just don't think he's there. I also think that the team that pays him the most is the team that's going to sign him. I know that Lyon are probably the best option, but if Wolves offer 50,000 more than Lyon, he's definitely going to go to Wolves.
So this leaves Barcelona needing to get a centre-back in as well, and they need to get some central midfielders, they need to get a centre-back, and they need to do it without buying anybody from outside the EU. So, I mean it could be a fun couple of weeks for Barcelona.
Ooh. Hopefully we got that non-EU rule right, because otherwise we look like right idiots now.
Yeah.
Probably got it wrong. So that's the end of transfer review for this week. If you want to get a transfer mention next week, just tweet it to us on the below handles. Pato, what else is happening on the Football Daily Network?
Oh, God.
Thursday, which would be... Oh, is it 12th man?
Is it the 12th man? Yeah, the return of the 12th man, where we guide you through fantasy football for the upcoming season with Sky Sports Fantasy Football. It's going to be very exciting. We've got some hot tips for you, though. Joe has had to re-record a section because he picked a player who's since been sold to Leeds. So, embarrassing.
Bloody hell, Barry.
We'll see you next time.